Yeah. What's your interpretation of the vehicle lineup? What's coming? What are they? Because they reiterated first half of next year, multiple
Mhm.
vehicles. Do you have any kind of guesses or inside info what you might think it is?
Certainly no inside info. I think it's reasonable to expect the refreshed Model Y
Right.
out of China first, and that just seems like an obvious thing. And it also seems obvious that they wouldn't tell us about it in any
Mm-hmm.
detail. It's just what happened with Model 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I suspect we'll get that, and they've dropped some hints about like using portions of the unboxed process on the existing assembly lines. So I think we'll get something like that. But they still have that note even in the Q3 report of newer, lower priced vehicles in the first half of next year. So Elon said on the call like something like all the vehicles will be cyber cabs, so there's like no new vehicle. I forget exactly what he said, but it was something a little bit confusing. But it does seem like there's some new vehicles in the works, as well as kind of a refreshed Model Y at a minimum, I would think.
All right. I had this conversation with uh, Warren Redlick just this morning, and I think one thing that was kind of shocking for many people, including me, was that Tesla said that they're going to sell the Cybercab to consumers or to people. Anybody can buy it if they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And then the debate is, well, why would they do that, right? Because you can sell it for, let's say, $30,000, and then they make their margin on that. But then they're missing out on $40,000 per year in robo-taxi revenue if they just owned it themselves. But people say, well, if they have $33 billion in cash, they could actually just go ahead. No, some people say it doesn't matter if they have $33 billion in cash. They can't buy, not sell the car. They built the car. They want to recoup that as fast as possible. Where do you fit on that? Because some people are telling me, or what Warren was saying, that they should not sell the car because in 6 months they would retrieve that revenue just on a monthly basis anyways. Like the 30 grand is not a hit to the cash flow.
I think this is a little bit of an irrelevant point because they can handle it with pricing. So I mean, let's just assume, for example, that there's like a robo-taxi network launched, and like the cash flow of the vehicles is very clear to both Tesla and to the person they're selling it to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Tesla can just charge $40,000 for FSD, or they can charge $1,000 a month, or however it works out. And if you've got a cash flowing asset, it's very easy to price it. And so I think the reasonable thing to expect is Tesla should be roughly agnostic about whether they own or sell the vehicles, as long as they're pricing FSD appropriately. And so if they're pricing FSD at $40,000 and that's all like flowing to the bottom line, I'm very happy as a Tesla owner. If they instead opt to own the vehicles outright and they operate them and get the same sort of cash flow on a net present value basis, I'm just as happy. And so where I think it actually makes sense that they will sell to other people is that you want to kind of have a distributed network for getting these vehicles to all the different population centers. I think it would be just logistically very challenging for Tesla to operate all these different fleets in every single geography that they want to operate. Now maybe they start off managing their own fleet in the first like pilot locations. I think that makes sense, and they probably would do that. But Tesla said for years that they want shepherds essentially to operate their their fleets, and I think that makes sense. And I think the way that you solve for that is just that you assume that they've got pricing, which if you put it in your MBA spreadsheet looks nutty, and like Wall Street would laugh at you if you do that. But you have to do that sort of thing to get to the point where you've got like a 5x to 10x valuation from here, which is like we've actually done this analysis. We actually did several months ago, like could Tesla even afford to just own the entire fleet outright, like with their cash pile? And like we did like this very detailed analysis of like pricing coming down and the ramp rate of the factory coming up and what that would look like, and basically came to the conclusion that they would definitely dwindle down their cash pile significantly lower. But like because the cash on cash return on these vehicles would be so high,
right?
They actually could do that, but they really should be just agnostic between charging someone else a lot of money and owning it outright.
Interesting. Great info that you just shared there. I haven't heard that before. Like that a lot. Okay. So they could just change the price of FSD or whatever, or change the monthly or whatever. Yeah.
The thing you have to be careful with is you've got to make sure that the math still works for the person who's going to buy it. So like you
Right.
got to look at, okay, what could they actually charge? What could their utilization be? What's it going to cost them for insurance and cleaning and all that stuff? So as long as you do that, and it's like, okay, that person has a 20% IRR, or like their net present value is like meaningfully positive at this purchase price, and then Tesla can still charge at, you know, like $40,000 FSD price or whatever, and eventually that comes down over time, I think, too, as saturation goes up. But like the math works, and I think so many of the Wall Street types haven't actually done the math from all the different perspectives. But you get to the point where you're like, all right, well, this is going to make so much money that like how it's split between the various parties is not the right point. The right point is, wow, this thing's going to make a lot of money, and if Tesla's the one that's got the technology and they can, you know, crank these out at $25,000, that's amazing news for investors.
All right. Well, so the robo-taxi, right? The cyber cab, they said that he said volume scale in 2026, not just production, not just you know, we are going to get to volume scale 2026. And he said 2 million cars per year. It could mean to me that it's a run rate of 2 million by the end of the year. Okay. Instead of like, it's not that we're going to make 2 million in 2026, but maybe the following year, I'll build 2 million. But even at 2 million, have you figured that out? Like, holy cow, if they produce 2 million, and then by the way, he talked a lot, very proud of the factory, the machine that builds the machine of the cyber cabs. And Jeff Lutz calculated that right now, Giga Shanghai, we know that they're able to produce at least one car every 30 seconds, 25 seconds actually, right? That's like crazy. This is the best factory out there in the world, one car every 30 seconds. But based on the words that Elon said, right, one half the magnitude or something like that, a third the whatever, it actually translates to 8 seconds. Like as in spitting, they might be able to spit out a cybercab every 8 seconds. That's like if you take what he said.
Jeez.
So
I heard the math wasn't quite that way. That's wild.
Yeah, no, he had Jeff and then another guy. They also did the same kind of calculation and he came up with that, which is just to give you an idea of what he meant by 50 seconds to what would it be if there's so much more efficient in producing these things. So if they produce 2 million cybercabs, I mean, you need to start modeling that out. What does that mean? They gave you a friggin' number, 2 million at some point. Let's say 2027, you know?
Yeah. So I would say it matters greatly whether those are autonomous or not. And I think they actually have to be autonomous unless they redesign them to, you know, to be like to have a steering wheel. So, I mean, this is where it gets to the point. They're saying they're going to solve autonomy by 2025 and then build like 2 million of these things, at least at a minimum, at a run rate by the end of 2026. Like that's where, for, you know, a finance guy like me, you got to say, what do you actually believe? Because I think if you just assume your base case model, if you assume that they're not actually going to solve FSD, you can't give them credit for those 2 million vehicles. You can't just be like, well, I think they'll produce 400,000 robo-taxis. Like that's kind of a stupid thing. Like that's where I think people are trying to justify like a $300 price target rather than like a $900. Like, so, because like you don't want to say something crazy. So like that will, if they produce 2 million units in 2026, like it has to be the case that they've solved autonomy and they can actually like put those to use, because otherwise they're going to have to, like, I don't know, it would just be some kind of like adjusted passenger version of that. So to me, that gets into that severe upside case. Like I think the real question from a modeling perspective then isn't how many cyber cabs do they produce in 2026 and 2027. It's, do you start giving them credit for robo-taxi and like the rideshare market and everything like that? Because that's the real fundamental shift in the modeling is, do they launch a robo-taxi network? It's not, you know, the actual number of units.
This is where it gets really weird, right? Because like he's committed. Okay, let's say they do. What is the negative downside? Can you model that out for me? So let's say that they do produce, like they go all in. They produce 1 million robo-taxis, but then autonomy is not ready. It gets delayed. What is the impact of the business if they actually do that?
Well, I think they wouldn't produce them if it's not solved. I mean, to me, the downside case is that those vehicles are just never produced. So maybe you invest all the tooling and everything to get the factory spooled up. But like, if it's not there, and if you don't have those, you know, the regulatory approval to go and put those into several different jurisdictions, at least in the United States and eventually globally. I think China seems likely that they'd get some in there as well. But like to me, it's like you can't have some like middle ground analysis where they produce these and sell them for $30,000 or something like that, and there's just a small margin. There's 2 million of them. I think it's an either or. This is where autonomy, in my mind, has always been a binary thing. Like you can get FSD attach rates and use that as an ADAS system, but anything beyond that, like you have to have a binary yes/no decision on like, do we give them credit for solving robo-taxis? And I think based on everything they've said, we should have a very solid answer on that in the next 6 months or so with this kind of rate.
That's what I'm waiting for.
That key metric.
I think there is a middle ground though. I think that worst case scenario, they didn't solve autonomy. But the reality is, you and I know that you can go ahead and take our cars if it's a very well-defined geo-fenced location. And then you might have a tele-operator that pops in every once in a while just to make sure. They could roll that out just like Waymo did. They could roll that out. Take 2 million cars and kind of just do it in very, very specific locations around the world. Whoever has approved it. That's like worst case scenario.
Yeah, but then you got to like stop that factory output at some point though, because like if you've got it only within those specific locations and it can't go outside those, then like you don't want to just keep pounding like 2 million vehicles per year into those same locations. So that's where I think it's a little bit tricky. I did want to circle back though to the point you made about the vehicle every 8 seconds. It reminded me of something Elon said that really stuck in my mind. This was I believe it was Q4 2017 earnings call. But he was talking about like the rate of speed on their Model 3 production out of Fremont, and he's saying like it's really impressive, but it's still basically just the rate of Granny and her walker, who's like faster than the line technically. Remember what he said next though really stuck with me though. He's like, you should at least be taking into consideration the coefficient of drag on the vehicles going through, like of the air pressure of the vehicles. They should be moving fast enough that you need to worry about drag and just with air resistance. And I was like, that's an insane way to think about it, but like that's a great target actually.
That doesn't apply anymore because it's not going through a production line anymore. It's like it's going to be like
with the unbox process,
and then spit.
You're right,
spit.
But it was. I think it's such a great way to think about it though. Yeah, it's just like really it's such an example of the physics way that he's talking about it. It's like, like we're the best factory in the world, and a lot like most CEOs would be like, all right, we did it, and he's just like, no, we can probably do 10 times better than that. Like it's such an insane.
I can't wait to see the unbox model because they spend a lot of time talking about that was something they're proud of. Anything about 4680 batteries. I mean, some people say it doesn't matter anymore. Lithium's prices have fallen. Battery is not important anymore. Like we're not going to be battery constrained. And yet they finally did kind of like a version of 4680 it's now mass production and is scaling. And then he said a couple times at the call, this is going to be the most cost competitive battery out there. We're still going to need as many as we can with our partners, but ours is going to be one of the most cost competitive out there. So I know you guys follow 4680 batteries quite closely as well.
It's hugely important. And I think it does get overlooked. I think a lot of people are kind of overlooking the magnitude of the scale that Tesla's trying to achieve. If they're really serious about, terawatt hour scale production between both auto and stationary storage, like you want to have as much diversity of supply as possible. And then beyond that, so like I actually do think that lithium prices might come back under pressure a little bit if we continue to see some of the scaling that we've seen. But like if for no other reason than the energy credits, it's worth pursuing. So like people kind of forget that they've got this plan to add 100 gigawatt hours of 4680 capacity to Giga Nevada. The credits alone, if they do that, are going to be worth $4.9 billion per year. Like that's how significant the scale of what they're trying to do is.
Wow.
And of course, on top of that, with a brand new line and hopefully like dry cathode and all the stuff that they've learned along the way, they should be driving like the actual cost of goods sold down on top of that. So if you're in a scenario where you've stripped out costs, and I don't know what they are now, but like let's say they're at $70 per kilowatt hour or something like that, and you're getting $4.9 billion a year through this IRA credit, like that's hugely impactful. That's over $1 in earnings per share per year contribution just on the credits. Which of course, like analysts will, well, those are going away eventually. You can't give them too much credit for that. But
right.
my point is like 4680 is super important, and they really do need as many cells as they can get. They're we're very happy with what they're doing in Lathrop and the contribution we're seeing, but like we're going to look back at this and be like, oh my gosh, like single digit gigawatt hours per quarter was not that exciting. when we're talking about like,
So
50 and 100, that's like very real money at that point.
I heard that Lathrop is, from what I heard, and they said that Lathrop is already at scale, 40 gigawatt hours. And then that Giga Shanghai, Megapack Shanghai, is now going to ship megapacks in the first quarter of next year. I mean, that changed the wording from just producing it to shipping it, which means that they're probably ahead there. Are you expecting, and are you modeling out, 2 more megapack factories announced?
Yeah, so I think they've sandbagged the capacity out of Shanghai a little bit, to be honest with you. They said 40 gigawatt hour capacity, but if you look at the size of the footprint that they've got at that facility, like pretty sure that'll do at least 60 when they do some more. But like we know how big their ambitions are, so maybe it's in several phases. But yeah, I mean, I think what we see from here is just a pretty continuous ramp. I do think it's important to keep in mind that energy is not like auto in that you produce the mega pack and then you don't recognize the revenue until it ships to the customer, but even then you only recognize a portion of it. And then you've got other milestones once they tested and confirmed that it meets all the specifications, and then once it's actually energized and connected to the grid, that whole process can take over a year. So Shanghai is going to ramp, but then where we start seeing the revenues is going to be like I'm going the wrong way here. The revenue recognition is going to be a delay on the ramp of Shanghai. So yes, I do have it ramping to, I think I've got like in my current forecast like 17 gigawatt hours by the end of Q4 next year. So if you think of both factories being at capacity, they should be doing 20 gigawatt hours per quarter. But I think just because of the lag, it's going to take a little bit of time. And then Powerwall is going to be on top of that. And then there's also going to be some stationary storage coming out of Giga Nevada, which is another thing that I think a lot of people have forgotten that Elon said, that they're actually going to be making mega packs with 4680 cells out of Giga Nevada once they get that up and running. So I think the plan is going to be, of course, Shanghai comes up and running, that they'll expand. I'm sure at some point Giga Nevada will expand, and then there's probably some other mega factory, I guess we're calling them now, that goes somewhere else. But the overall trend is a continuous ramp up of that, which I think is going to lead to a long time of double digit
your wealth
growth.
Of information. Okay, one last question on bots. So we know that bots may not, it's very unlikely to contribute to revenue until 2027. Okay, but they're going to start using maybe 2,000 of them in their factories. Could you model out what the savings could be? Is that too little? I remember Tom Jew one time said that when Giga Mexico is built, we could have 5,000 employees and we can have 5,000 bots. And he goes, if we add those bots, imagine what the savings would be. I've got a recording of him saying that. So adding 2,000, it's not going to do anything to actual cost of goods, anything like that, or?
Yeah, so I suspect it's roughly neutral. The way that I kind of think about it is, I mean, you can imagine the first bot that they put on the line is going to be like a massive cost increase, right, relative to the same worker, because you're going to have several $150,000 engineers or whatever monitoring the progress of this thing, and it's not going to like work as efficiently. Probably like there's going to be issues that you need to troubleshoot, and you're investing in the learning of that bot to get better over time. So by the time you get to 1,000 or 2,000, maybe you're at the point where those engineers can be spread over 10, 50, 100 bots. I don't know whatever the right kind of ratio is, and so you're able to have the cost savings from not having the employees be maybe roughly at parity with the cost that you're having to kind of develop the technology and monitor the bots and everything. And then at some point in the future, when you get to tens of thousands or whatever, and maybe the right number is 500. I don't know. Maybe at 2,000 bots, you actually are having a cost of goods sold improvement. But my thinking would be it's probably going to be small, and I don't know where that inflection point is from. It costs us more today, or it's saving us more. I don't know exactly how many bots that would be.
Okay, got it. So from your perspective, it's exciting, but you're not going to model it in either cost savings or revenue until maybe 2027 and beyond. Yeah.
I mean, cost savings in 2026 seems reasonable to me, but does it move the needle? Do you have I haven't done. I'd be interested to do the back to the
That's what I'm
envelope
asking you
math,
to
but like
do.
if you
Yeah.
get 1,000,
Yeah.
I'm too slow and tired to to do it right now. But like
I know.
1,000 bots
No.
offsetting,
Yeah.
those
Scott
laborers,
Walter
maybe
and
that
CERN
is.
have done this, and it'd be good to have you kind of, give them your guidance of if it's correct. But yeah, I like what you're saying. So right now you're saying it's a wash for a while, so you're kind of not yet incorporated
Yeah.
into your models. Yeah.
I think the cost savings will be there eventually, but I think the more impactful thing from an investment standpoint is, when they get to the point where they are reporting cost savings and they've actually sold some to other, third parties, that's when like the revenue upside starts to become a lot more impactful than just their cost savings. So I think it's more like if they get to the point where they're seeing cost savings in their factory, then you can start giving them some credit for actually having a product that could be the most significant product in the history of Earth, like Elon said. So to me, it's more important as an indicator of the financial success of that product as opposed to the cost savings that it will bring.
Yeah, agreed. It's not the cost savings. I mean, it's going to be significant, but it's by that point, it's the revenue that's going to be like outshining that bit of it. Well, yes and no. Yes and no.
I mean, they're
yes
important.
No.
I mean, it kind of comes back to the original part of the conversation. I care about quarterly results, but I know what really matters at the end of the day is not like Q3 2024. It's the bigger picture. And I feel the same way with the bots. The cost savings definitely matter, but the bigger picture for me is, do people start taking it seriously as like a world-changing product?
Well, if you're the first, that's your target and you're competing with Walmart, and you have 10,000 bots, but Walmart doesn't get it for 5 more years, you bet it's going to make a difference in pricing, and you could wipe them out by the time, they get their bots in place. Be curious as just map that out and, how much. Thank you, Matt. That was great. That was fun. So follow Matt